There we go. Hello, my name is Kathleen McElvenna. I am a lecturer at the University of Derby, and today I'm going to talk to you a bit about the history of pensions in the post office. So looking at the creation of them over the 19th century. It's kind of a whistle-stop tour, so forgive me if I go quite too quickly, but feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to share my slides with Laura as well to send around. So this is where they all started. These are the pension records in the post office, and these are applications to the Treasury for a pension, and they contain all sorts of amazing detail, which I'm sure you can see and understand of why they'd be fascinating documents. And I came across these at the early stages of my PhD and was just fascinated. I didn't even know you could get pensions in the 19th century. So it really spurred on my investigation further throughout my PhD, which is what I'll be talking about today. So I'm going to split the talk into two, the first half of the 19th century up to 59, which is a really important act in 1859, and then the second half of the 19th century, where there's a few different changes, but I thought you might be interested in. So as you can see in those first 60 years, there's quite a lot of discussion and quite a lot of changes to superannuations or pensions in the 19th century. Lots of acts, lots of Treasury minutes and select committees and royal commissions, which are basically lots of people getting together to discuss what they are and what they should be like. I'm going to concentrate on a couple of these and not all of them, so the important ones. So the first fundamental one comes in 1810, and it's really important to remember that this is in the atmosphere of Napoleonic Wars. The country is trying to save money, and there's also a lot of criticism on something called old corruption. So these are systems such as the civil list or pensions list, so lists of individuals or families who are being deemed by those in power, government, monarchy, of who should be getting payments, annual payments, payments for life, payments for the rest of their families' lives. And there's many critics, radicals, who are kind of saying, these people have contributed nothing. Why are we giving them this money? Some of the people on those lists are civil servants. Some of these people are working for government, and this is a way to reward them. So the Superannuation Act is brought in to bring in a more systematic way of remunerating and saying thank you for service to these sorts of people, for civil servants specifically. So this is non-contributory, and the payments to kind of put some control and reduce them in some way is based around length of service, so it will increase the longer the person worked for them. This act also brought in a sense, there was a feeling that in the wording it was saying that there was a right to a pension, that a civil servant had the absolute right to get one. And it's this issue, alongside the contributions, that are heavily criticised and brings in changes through a Treasury minute in 1829 and another act in 1834. And this essentially brings in contributions at differing scales for some employees. It's also worth mentioning this is not universal across the civil service. It applies to some offices and some not. And not everyone actually has to pay contributions. So there's some roles like London letter carriers and mail guards who are deemed to earn too little to have to contribute. So as you can see, things are totally uneven across the service. There's all sorts of different rules. It's very complicated. If we have a moment to have a quick look at what's going on in the post office at this time, as I mentioned, under the 34 Act, it didn't apply to all offices, and that was even within a department like this post office. So you could only ask for one if you were in London, Edinburgh or Dublin. I have, through the records, found evidence of applications from other locations, such as Birmingham or Glasgow. Unfortunately, I haven't found any records of if these were actually granted. So if the post office is just making a claim, even though they're not officially allowed, I think that's really interesting in and of itself. But it is significant, I think, that these were being made. There are obviously quite localised systems as well, and these are very much based on kind of traditional ways of supplying pensions or supporting people in older age. So some of the best evidence I've found is for a London letter carrier superannuation fund. And this was started in 1807 when a new early morning delivery was put into place. So this is obviously a time period when people would pay to receive post. So in the process of doing an early delivery, there would be monies received through fees of doing that. And this was deemed enough to kind of start a superannuation fund for these letter carriers. The other sort of systems started to pay into that as well, fines and Christmas gratuities. Notably, by the 1840s, the letter carriers are asking not to contribute in any financial way to this system and actually be removed from it. And it's quite notable, this is the 1840s. It's often known as the Hungry 40s. It's a really difficult economic time for people. Also at this time, the wider civil service is basically starting to agitate for change in superannuation funds as well. As well as it being the Hungry 40s, income tax is also introduced, which is going to really significantly affect civil servants as sort of white-collar clerical workers. It would apply to them. So there's a real movement through the civil servants for change. And part of this is the fact that they're contributing to something that partly they think they're not going to live long enough to receive. They sort of argue not many people get a pension, but also their family have no claim to it. They can't, it isn't, they have to pay for life insurance as well as contribute to this in order to support their families. This agitation culminates in the creation of a newspaper as well. So one of the leading points of this newspaper is to argue for change in the superannuation system. And the newspaper is called the Civil Service Gazette, held in the British Library, and a great read if you're ever there. This campaigning leads to discussions in Parliament. I'm not going to read this long quote, but it's just kind of an example that people such as the Chancellor of the Exchequer are coming to Parliament and saying, we need to look at this. These are loyal civil servants and they are upset, and we need to address what they're upset about and see what we can do to help them. And due to these sort of discussions in Parliament, a select committee and royal commission eventually are set up. These are really fascinating documents because they give us an insight into what people saw about the superannuations, why they were created and why they should run the way they do. So they're justified in providing this superannuation for three reasons. They said it's important for civil servants to feel safe and independent position, so not having to necessarily pay heavily into other sort of savings funds or get into debt or any of these sorts of worries. Public opinion is really important. They think it would be quite shocking for a civil servant, this is supposed to be a respectful representative of government, to have to end up, say, on something like the Poor Law or something like that. And also in ways ensuring that official work remained efficient. And this is partly efficiency in the way of keeping employees happy, that they're working, they'll work well if they're happy, but also as a way of removing those who are less efficient. So the sick, the slow, the old can then be removed from work and keep that government machinery going. There's also really fascinating discussions about contributions, and essentially the reasoning for not keeping contributions, are that there's certain grades that just cannot afford it. So for people like letter carriers, they'd have to significantly increase their salary to then take money off them, which seemed counterproductive. And it also removed that sense of property. It removed those sort of arguments that the civil service were agitating around, to say that this is our money, our family deserve it. It gave the power to the Treasury. It really put the ball in their court and gave them the discretion to say who got a pension, when they got a pension and how much they got. So still, even though there seems to be all these justifications, it was quite a difficult thing to get through Parliament, ultimately because it cost more money. It kind of took the strength and argument of people such as Sir Henry Stafford Northcote, who was significantly involved in a sort of reorganisation and rethinking of the civil service. So importantly, this is coming in at the same time that there's a shift from an emphasis on patronage, so people getting the job because of who they know, to meritocracy, to people getting the job because of who they are and what they know and their ability. So this is no coincidence, this is coming in at the same time as exams and medical examinations as well. So there's a real emphasis that having these pensions is going to get good people, good character and good workers as well. So eventually it manages to get through. What are the main significant points of this Act? Well, it is keeping these conditions that have now been well established of age and length of service. You have to be over 60 or to have worked for over 10 years to be eligible for a superannuation. You must perform with diligence and fidelity, so basically character and loyalty are really important. Contributions are removed. And the scale is changed. So there's always been a scale, but this time it increases every year. So it starts from being fractions of 60ths. So you could get 41, 42, 43, depending on how many years you were working, opposed to previously it would jump. So you'd have to work for significantly 5 more years, say, to get an increase in your pension. So this is the fundamentals of this civil service pension, which is now carried on well into the 20th century. So now I'm going to look at the second half of the 19th century, which is, there's not as much change, so it's a bit shorter this half, but yeah, we'll look at some of the important parts. So this 59 Act gives us these wonderful documents. These forms are now created that departments have to fill in and submit to the Treasury in order for their employees to get a pension. So this is all the type of information that the Treasury wants to know and that they base their calculations on. There are still some discussions within the second half of the 19th century about what a pension is and how much they should be giving, though notably sort of the Select Committee and Royal Commissions tend to be looking at expenditure in the civil service as a whole, and superannuation is just a tiny part of that, of those discussions. Another notable change is the compulsory retirement at 65, which comes in 1891. But I'm going to focus a bit more on debates at the end of the 19th century. So during this time is the start of the deferred pay movement. So this is an argument put forward by the civil servants that because they are paid significantly less than people working at a similar grade or standard of work in industry, that their pensions are actually part of their salary. They are paid less because they get a pension. So that makes it theirs. And with that in mind, they say their family should have a claim to it, and that they should be able to get a payout, say if they die in service or very early on in claiming their pension. So there's a big movement and push for this. Interestingly, the old age pensions debate at the end of the 19th century feed into this. So there's one argument that is sort of puts forward that all citizens, like civil servants, contribute to the economy of the country, and therefore everyone deserves a pension in old age because they're all contributing to the great and good empire in that sense. However, there's people like Octavia Hill who put forward a different argument and say, well, actually, no, all citizens and civil servants are not the same. The pension that civil servants get is part of their salary, is part of their contracted remuneration, and so it's not the same. So these debates are unwittingly feeding into and helping, giving support to the deferred pay movement, whereas the government is a bit like, well, no, it's not part of their salary, it's our discretion as the Treasury, which was kind of their reasoning for not introducing contributions. The debates get strong enough to initiate a Royal Commission. This Royal Commission doesn't go as far as agreeing with the civil servants that the pensions are part of their salary, but it does look at a way to kind of meet their grievances and try and think about what they can do to help. And they make a suggestion that essentially says if you reduce their pensions overall, we'll be able to have some money to give to their families. And this is what was taken on in the 1809 Superannuation Act. I think it's notable, it comes a year after the Old Age Pensions Act, where there's a real sort of move in government to help and support as many people as they can. And as part of this, that civil servants' family now have a claim to a pension, but at the cost to their overall pension. Notably, it doesn't apply to women, but I can talk more about women if you're interested in that as well. But that's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave it there, but it's a whistle-stop tour. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. This is my email and Twitter handle on there. But I hope you enjoyed it and I hope to speak to you all soon. Thank you.